everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson, and I'll be your host as always. And once again, I am joined by Scott Coyne. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
I'm great, Ben. It's good to be back. Hello, everybody. I was just thinking we were treated to some absolutely cracking goals this last match day. Nielsen's for Club, Summers for Cercle, Dryers for Anderlecht, and Elzati's for Standard were real bangers, I thought. Real quality. Great week for goals.
Yeah, absolutely. That Standard Liège Union game had some absolute classic goals in there. We'll definitely get on to talk about those, but let's quickly run through the results from the weekend then. Friday night, Mechelen against Genk. Fantastic atmosphere at the Oostende Kansen. That one finished 2 goals apiece. Antwerp beat Eupen 2-0 at home. Slang left it late to get a draw with Zulte Waregem. 2 red cards in that one as well. That one finished 1 goal apiece. Oostende kept a clean sheet. Unfortunately, they didn't score. They drew 0-0 with Charleroi. Union and Standard played out another game with fantastic atmosphere, which finished 4-2 to Standard Liège. Cercle Bruges against Club Bruges. The Bruges derby did not disappoint. That one finished 2 goals apiece. Ghent, they struggled for a bit, but they managed to get the job done against a really struggling Leuven side. That one finished 2-0 to the host. Kortrijk and Anderlecht played out a great one as well. That one finished 2-2. And then Sint-Truiden rounded off the weekend with a defeat to the ever-impressive Westerlo. Let's start in Mechelen then. Franken obviously back at the Oostende Kansen for the first time since departing in the summer. And you always knew it was going to be a good atmosphere, even if Mechelen were basically without their entire midfield. No Rob Scoops, obviously suspension, big a starter, obviously also suspended. However, they got off to the perfect start. Fantastic counter-attack from them. Eventually, the ball fell to Jeppe Hermans, I think, after some good play from Ngoy, Jonas van Heck as well on the right-hand side. Good save from Van der Voort, however, he just pushed it straight back into the kind of danger zone. Hermans was there to tuck it in, much to the delight of the fans behind the goal. Lovely kit Mechelen were wearing, as well as an anniversary kit for the saving of the club. Unfortunately, the sponsor just does kind of ruined it a little bit, but like it was a classic kit that did look really, really nice. And they definitely played up to that level, and the atmosphere was really, really pumping. Genk did get back into the game, though. Tolu Orakadale on his first start for the club with a lovely pass across the goal. Mike Tessel just needed one touch, didn't even take a touch, just first time finish from him into the bottom corner. His 7th goal of the season, I believe. However, Mechelen did come back in the second half with just 15 minutes to go. Really nice play from Jonas Malady on the right-hand side with the ball all the way across the back stick. Nicolas Storm had all the time and space in the world to tuck that one in. And the Malima fans probably thought they'd done it, but in the 94th minute, Genk get a free kick. Nicolas Castro with the free kick. This was cleared straight to Patrick Hazowski, who comes around the outside, whips in a really deep cross. Brian Haynen's just completely unmarked to tuck it in. That makes it 2 goals apiece. Genk escape, I guess you could say, from the graveyard with a draw, but it's got a promising performance from Mechelen given everything. Their home form under Stephen Defoe has been fantastic, so that's not really been the issue. But a really good game, great atmosphere, and for Genk, definitely will feel like a 0.1 in the end, thanks to that late equaliser from Brian Haynen.
Yeah, much improved performance from Mechelen, apart from the end result, and the key issue obviously being kind of drop points right at the death. Feels a bit like deja vu for them at the moment. They've actually dropped 5 points out of a possible 6 over the last couple of games from match-winning positions and conceding really, really late goals. And when you think about it that way, they probably would have been clear of getting completely sucked into the drop zone, which we've spoken about over the last couple of weeks, if they'd managed to get those 6 points over the line, which were theirs, but for some suicidal, final seconds of the last couple of games. Stephen Defoe not happy, taking his jacket off and giving it a good boot at full time, which is understandable. Although I prefer kicking water bottles, I think that's much more satisfying. But you could kind of feel the tension a little bit. I thought, when they were holding on to the 2-1, you could sense them falling a bit deeper. And just the atmosphere was a little bit, there was definite tension in the air, and I think that kind of played into this. Having said that, that ball into the box that you mentioned from Rozovsky was absolutely fantastic. That's just begging out for somebody to get in the end of it, which is what Brian Enan did. Really, really good ball. Virtual last touch of the game, and they grab a point, which is a really sore one for Mechelen. But they really need to stop conceding late goals like that, because it's becoming a bit of a problem for them. And if they can do that, I think they'll be all right. They need a couple of wins now, really to be able to relax a little bit, and they can't do that yet. So they've still got a little bit of hard work ahead of them. And obviously, Genk themselves have dropped some points recently since Onuachu's left, as things have got a little bit tighter at the top. So this isn't just something that seems to be affecting Mechelen. They're not alone in that at the moment.
No, definitely not. It is just, we're getting to that business end of the season, to use a classic footballing cliche, aren't we? And teams are starting to look at their situations, and like with Mechelen, the tension at the end there, and then with Genk, obviously, it was losing Onuachu was always going to be something that would affect their season. I think anyone thinking it wouldn't was pretty naive to think that it wouldn't. But rescuing a point gives some confidence boost going into the next couple of games. And against like Ghent, when we saw them play against Ghent, they were pretty decent as well. So it's just, kind of finding their new identity, I guess, going forward without him is sort of the way to go. This obviously was a good result for Antwerp, who on a good run of form. They hosted Eupen, and pretty comfortable one for them in the end. Took a while for things to get going. They did have a couple of chances. Merza with a couple of good saves, a couple of good blocks from the Eupen defence. However, when Vesely just kind of pushed Kirk over when he was about to tap the ball in the back of the net, it was, I don't know how the referee didn't give anything for that. It was just like, obviously something's happened there, because Kirk was about to put it in and Vesely just pushed him over. Obviously, VAR intervenes. Vesely gets himself sent off. Vincent Janssen steps up, and Merza goes the right way, to be fair to him, but it's hit with such venom, the penalty, that he wasn't really going to stop it. It's a shame, because Merza's been probably one of the better keepers this season in the Pro League, quite under the radar since his move from Union Berlin. So probably time to start talking a little bit more about him as a goalkeeper, and it feels a bit unfair to be saying anything bad about him at this point. But there's not much he could do about this one. Nothing he could do about the second one either from Jurgen Ekkelenkamp, because Richie Delac gets an assist for shooting terribly, and it just kind of flies across the goal. Ekkelenkamp taps it in, finishes 2-0 at that point. I mean, Antwerp pretty much coasting to victory by the end of it. 17 shots, just 2 on target. Thankfully, those 2 were the ones that went in. 70% possession to Eupen's 30%. 4 shots for Eupen, absolutely none on target. Not a game that Eupen are going to ever really kind of hang their season on, are they, really, Scott? Whereas for Antwerp, it's a game that you just win it comfortably and move on to next week. It shortens the gap to Genk to 10 points, 3 points to Union after results from this weekend. So Van Bommel's side are starting to get a bit of momentum. I think Mandela Keita has been a fantastic pickup. Just watching the highlights of this one, he was really involved in everything good that was happening. And while his old club can't even score a goal, it's it must be quite frustrating if you're a Leuven fan to see Keita starting for Antwerp and being a massive boost for them in their midfield that has been so injury hampered, I guess.
I mean, there's not a lot really, I think, that we can say about this game. It's one of those, file under a routine home win. I mean, the red card's a little bit harsh, but, it is what it is, letter of the law and all of that. And I think, Eupen actually just didn't do enough to get anything out of this game, 10 men or not. And we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago as well, that they really need to kind of pick up a few points now, just to kind of lift them out of the mire that they're in, because they're still very much in it. I feel that if they can get sort of 4 to 6 points out of the last 8 games, that will probably be enough. And it's more on the basis that I don't see the 3 sides in the drop zone at the moment going in a run that mean that they're going to catch Eupen in any way. It's possible, but I just feel that 4 out of 6 might be enough. I think them and Kortrijk have just about enough at the moment. They're not clear, but they're almost there on the basis that the sides below them are showing no signs of doing anything that suggests they're going to catch them. There are some big fixtures coming up for some of these sides soon, actually, that could have a big say in that. But a couple of wins for Eupen would change the picture completely for them, really. A win that just keeps the momentum going for Antwerp, really, and the pressure up. And we've been saying it feels like for quite a while now, but they're absolutely in this. And I think they will feel if the gap stays the same that as it is at the moment, I think they'll feel come the playoffs that they will be in with a right good shout, because as we know, it comes down to those 6 games. So it's looking very much like a strong 3-horse race at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We were talking, weren't we, actually, about Eupen's running, just the 3 of us. Obviously, yeah, you're actually still part of this podcast, hopefully back soon. But Eupen, yeah, they've got kind of a tough run in the sense that they've got Circle, they've got Union, they've got Ghent, Anderlecht, a couple of sides who are all still playing for something. But then it's the games against Oostende, Kortrijk, and Zorteval again that you're looking at. If they can, like Oostende at home, if they can win that one, and if they can beat Zorteval again at home, you'd think that's probably going to do it. Draw with Kortrijk, pick up maybe a couple of draws against these other sides, and they should be fine. It's just whether you can trust them to do that. And that's the thing, because scoring goals has been an issue for them without kind of Conan and Dree or Steph Peters. It's not really been happening. Oh, and Reagan Charles Cook as well. Apologies, he has been scoring a couple, but Previak has not been firing at all, which is the importance of him scoring goals has been kind of magnified massively in the sense of that for them this season. Whereas for Antwerp, yeah, I mean, the double is still very much on in the sense of they're still in the cup. They got that semi-final coming up against Union. And then their running's actually not that bad at all, is it? You've got Mechelen, Salang, Charleroi, Zorteval, Kortrijk all in there. But then you have got Cercle and St. Truden. But sides that they, on paper, and the way they're playing, they should be able to beat and kind of dominate these teams. It's the Belgian Pro League. This doesn't always happen, and there will be shocks within that. But they should be fairly confident that if sides around them drop points, they've got the fixtures to kind of keep pulling the points back to Union and to Genk. And I mean, the way it's kind of going, we could have a really, really nice tight playoff one. But yeah, like you said, between those 3 teams, we'll speak about the 4th team a little bit later on, because I know a lot of listeners are asking questions about the 4th team. Like you said, kind of routine win there. Let's go to Salang against Zorteval. Then simply a must-win game for both sides, but neither side did win it, and that's kind of the story of this one. And also, yeah, just it kind of goes from bad to worse for Zorteval, but we'll start kind of with the positives, I guess, for them, with Jelle Vossen scoring his penalty in the 43rd minute. Hasn't missed his last 4 or 5 penalties, I don't think it was, right in front of the away fans as well, who looked absolutely delighted. But also they just couldn't find any other goals. They had 12 shots, only 4 on target, just couldn't find the back of the net, which was kind of the story against Oostende. Christian Bruls then gets himself sent off in the 73rd minute. That evens things up because they were playing with more men when Marvin Sabalbal got himself sent off in the 62nd minute. So now both sides are down to 10 men. But Nicholas Romans also picked up a yellow card, which means for the Kortrijk game, they're now without Bruls, Romans, or Ruud Vormer, which is just massive. They're 3 of their most important central midfielders. Support Abdoulaye Sissaca's got a lot to do in that central midfield role against Kortrijk. Looked like they were about to hold on, but a late Salang corner eventually finds its way to Morgan Poati, and this is a really low-key good finish from Morgan Poati, kind of half volley into the back of the net. Nothing that Sami Bossert could really do about it from Poati. But again, it just Salang then couldn't push on for the winner. Zorteval couldn't push on for the winger. They share the points. It feels like these last 2 games for Zorteval have just been they should really have won both of them, to be honest. Like, they should have won both of those 2 games. But now, Scott, they're going into that derby with Kortrijk, again thinking this is a must-win game. And these last 2 must-win games, they haven't been able to win. So how do we know they're going to win this one? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke last week, didn't we, about how important that the 3 games that they're in the middle of at the moment, the third one, the Kortrijk one that you referenced coming up this weekend, were going to be, because that's 3 games against the sides in and about them. And if they could get enough points out of those, then they would stand a really good chance of kind of climbing out of the drop zone. And obviously they've drawn 2 of them so far when they were much the better side. They've now got Kortrijk coming up, and need to get something out of that, obviously, but they certainly haven't performed well enough in terms of the points that they've got over those last 2 games to kind of suggest that they're going to climb out now. There's just a slight feeling, and you alluded to it a wee bit when you're talking about the injuries and suspensions starting to kind of pile up a little bit now to key players players, I think that's going to affect them because these, Vormer and Bruls actually have had quite a big impact in a positive sense since they've come in, and losing them, I think, is going to be quite difficult for them. They've got Kertrijk coming up, which they have to ideally win if they're going to have any hope of kind of climbing out. And then they've got a run to the rest of the season, which isn't ideal either. They've still got Ghent to play. They've still got to go to Slessen to play Standard. They've got Antwerp. And Charleroi. So they've got some, on paper, difficult games coming up. I suppose Mbaile's looking at this now because it's the only way you can look at it and go, okay, right, well, we've not got the points we should have against the sides that we should have got the points against. We're going to have to get them elsewhere, and that's the reality of it now, with some unfortunate injuries and suspensions. But as far as this game is concerned, I think they were definitely the better side, Zalta, but it's Groundhog Day again. They actually couldn't see it out, and that obviously underlines why they are where they are. Sarang just kind of hanging in there, and I'm glad you mentioned Poati's goal, actually, because I forgot to mention that in the little summary of goals that I thought were great this weekend. That probably deserves to be in there. It was a cracking finish, no doubt about it. But yeah, I mean, Zalta will be really disappointed not to have done better out of the last two games, considering that they're playing sides that are right in there with it. Because those three games, I think I even said it last week, I felt that those three fixtures were season-defining and potentially season-saving games, and they look like they've got past them now for the most part.
Yeah, and they've got a tricky run in. After Kortrijk, it's Mechelen in the Cup, Leuven on the 4th of March, and then you're playing the teams that are fighting for those European spots, Ghent, Standard and Antwerp all in a row. That's a tough 3 games in March. Obviously, they got that Eupen game in the middle of April. That's the second to last game, and by then, who knows what's going to happen. Like, Kortrijk are picking up points against these other teams, like the Anderlechts and stuff like that. That's what Zulta are going to have to do, because you can't rely on anyone else at the moment. You need to be the one picking up your own points. Sarang's run-ins looks super difficult as well. They've got Mechelen. I think Mechelen are the only team in and around kind of that relegation zone that they play. Everyone else is playoff 1 or playoff 2 hunting that they face for the rest of the season. So it's going to be difficult. And the thing with Sarang, they'll probably pick up a point or two or win a couple of those games. So you can never really count them out, because they will just randomly pop up with something like that. But I don't expect them to be consistent enough to get enough points. And I mean, that's kind of the reality of their situation anyway, and we all kind of knew that going into the season. Let's go to Oostende against Charleroi, 0-0, which is a rarity for an Oostende game, that's for sure. I think, Salham, he's maybe finally found the goalkeeping and defensive three that makes the most sense. Balak, the winter signing, came in, I think it was his first start for the side, so that's always a good sign. Ugerheid and Rodin, those guys all kept a clean sheet. So Hubert. Not that Charleroi had many shots, they only had 3 on target, whereas Oostende has so many. 17 shots, just 6 on target. And this would be kind of like the one that got away, I think they'll see. I know that Hornby said after the game, it's like, well, we've kept a clean sheet, that's a start. But it's kind of like that start needed to happen like a couple of weeks ago. If you really had any kind of hope of getting out of this situation that you're currently in. It does kind of close the gap a little bit. They're now 5 points off of Eupen, they're up to the 20 points, just 2 points behind Zulta again. But again, it's frustrating for them that they keep clean sheet, but they didn't score and put away any of those chances. And they've now got, again, they're kind of like Solang. They've only got one side really in the relegation zone in their last couple of games, which is Eupen. Everyone else apart from Leuven, and Leuven doesn't come until the end of April, is again playoff 1 or playoff 2 hunting. So all these sides have something to play for, which could help Oostende, maybe, I don't know. But sometimes it works both ways, doesn't it? Where they're so far back that there's no pressure, so they start to play. Or now they know every game is almost a must win. They're under too much pressure. We see things like this. But positives is they keep the clean sheet. Negatives is they didn't score. To Charleroi, it's just kind of, it almost feels a little bit like the Antwerp Open game, where there's not really much to say about the game, but more about the repercussions of that. I guess for Charleroi, it kind of, playoff 2 is probably starting to drift a little bit away, given the form of some of the teams in and around playoff 2.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you on all of that. On the clean sheet, I think that's the first clean sheet that Oostende have had since the 10th of September, which is 19 games ago, which is pretty extraordinary and says a lot in itself. And I think for most of those games, they were conceding at least 2 goals as well. So that explains why they're in the predicament that they're in. I thought they were the better side, actually, and looked more likely to get the points. I felt they were quite off it in the first half. I think their dual success rate was just, physically they were nowhere near the intensity and aggression levels that Dominic Talhammer would want them to be, and they were much better in the second half. That seems to have been a bit of a pattern with them for a few weeks now. They've been much better in the second half than in the first half, and in a way that's maybe part of their problem. I think they've been starting games slowly, which obviously is never a positive thing, no matter where you are in the league. But yeah, the Coos boys with the better side, difficult for them. I mean, we're talking a lot about different sides' run-ins and looking at their run-in, you don't see a lot of points there. There's some tough games coming up, Genk. They've still to go to the Ambride, that'll play club. They've got Westerlo, Standard to come, and they've still got to go to the Wasabi Cyan now to play Binky's boys, St Truden as well. So I just don't see where the momentum's going to come from to get the points. They're 5 points adrift now with 8 games to go, and this is why I kind of feel that Eupen probably, with maybe 4 out of 6 points, might be enough for them to be safe if they can get that, because I don't see the 3 sides in the drop zone, as I was saying, going on anything like the sort of run that's going to overturn that. So it's very fine margins at the moment, but it's still a very grim situation for them as well. But Fraser Hornby's right. The one positive is the clean sheet, and there just aren't a lot of positives kind of coming out of the Coos boys at the moment, unfortunately. Another tough week for them.
Yeah, definitely another tough week for the boys on the coast. Tough week for Union. They hosted Standard Liège in the Saturday night game, and yeah, as expected, when these two sides meet, it's always going to be a fantastic atmosphere. Standard took the lead. Really nice pressing from them in the midfield area, winning the ball back. William Palakwisha driving forward before releasing Philip Zinkernagel. He just showed a little bit of quality to Ran Maurice to give Standard a 1-0 lead. Jorbi Vertessen equalised 2 minutes later. Lovely through ball to him. Kind of like Mike Chessel, just didn't take any touches. Just instant first time finish past Bodart in the Standard goal to make it 1-1. 3 minutes later, we had another goal. 3 goals in the space of 5 minutes. Steven Alzate, after some nice play from Aaron Donham on the wing, he plays it back across. It falls to Steven Alzate in the box. Lovely turn and finish. His feet were fantastic in this. Just a lovely little kind of fake turn in the box, smashing it past Maurice in the goal to make it 2-1 to Standard. Into the second half we go. Simon Adinga's introduced by Gerets in the second half. He makes his presence felt. Lovely little step over and drive to the byline. He whips it across. Somehow, Dusen, Bocardi, and Leifis just forgot about Victor Boniface. Despite him being pretty tall and a pretty big lad, they just completely forgot he was there. He's not going to score an easier goal than that. Lovely header from Big Vic. That one made it 2 goals apiece. And that's how it was staying until the 85th minute. The excellent William Balakwisha, he did a really nice finish actually in the box to make it 3-2 to Standard, sending every time they scored, the fans just kind of ran from. I mean, if you've ever been to the Dudum of the Stade Joseph Marian, you'll know that the away fans are kind of, there's like a little bit of grass between them and the pitch, and then they see like barriers, and the Standard fans are just like on the barriers, and every time they scored, it was kind of like what you get in South America, where they leave the seats free ahead of them, and they all just kind of surge. The fans just kind of surge towards it. But instead of celebrating with the fans, because he scored down that end, he runs back to like wind up the Union fans.
Oh.
And there's like a kid, he must have been about 13, just giving him the middle finger, and his dad's just looking at him like, and he looks at his dad, he's like, puts his finger down. Then the bloke behind him, he must be like 30 something, is doing it as well. So it's like, yeah, I wonder where you got that from. But yeah, at that point, it's kind of all Standards in sense of they are ahead 3-2 with just a couple of minutes left. Union pushing, but Standard win a free kick just inside the Union half. Ball goes over the top. Union just do not defend it at all. Defender leaves it to Maurice. Maurice leaves it to the defender. Aaron Donham decides that he'll have a little bit of it. He races through, flicks it over Maurice's head, then tucks it in. he's grabbing the Standard fans. He actually just goes straight up to them behind the goal because they've surged again, obviously. Then Noah descends, like hugging everyone on the touchline. Him and Ronnie Dyler have a massive embrace. They know how big a win this was for Standard, and we've got some questions about it, so I won't talk about it too much. But obviously, they lost 2-0 to Kortrijk at home, and then they go and do this to a side that have not lost for months. It's just ridiculously weird, and they are starting to close in on playoff one, and they're doing it without a striker. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, Standard were, I thought, really good this weekend. Clinical, aggressive, brave, direct. Absolutely everything that Ronnie Dyler has been talking about all season and kind of trying to drum into them. And that's the template right there in that performance. And I'm sure he probably said something very similar to them afterwards in the dressing room. That's the level. That's the mentality that I want you to approach all games with, because we know that they can compete with some of the big boys. We'll speak about that in a little while with some listeners' questions. But Standard were absolutely excellent. I thought Alzati's goal actually was brilliant. I mean, that was just really good instinctive football, actually, and a brilliant finish. The sort of goal that gets you up off your seat and out of the dugout and all of those things. And understandably, Ronnie Dyler absolutely delighted with almost every aspect of this game. I should say I'm particularly pleased that the Standard fans didn't set Dudon Park on fire. They had rather a lot of flares with them, which were great for the atmosphere. But when I was watching it did make my heart jump a beat thinking about, hang on a minute, we're about 3 metres away from a park here, and there's about 100 flares in amongst that crowd, all as spectacular as it looked. So that must have been quite something for the stewards at the Joseph Marion by that game. But great atmosphere, brilliant performance from Standard. Union, on the other hand, I feel they didn't play badly. Maybe just a little bit off it from the levels that they normally set, but generally not a bad performance. Their first loss since September, that brilliant run has come to an end, which was always going to at some point. And it was interesting to see Karel Giererts after the match and his post-match kind of team talk on the pitch. He did say, look, we know we're a good side. We played quite well. We didn't win. You know what I mean? We'll just go again kind of next time. So I think he just feels that, they were beaten by a side who were just better than him on the evening. And they just have to kind of chalk it up to that more than anything else. But great stuff from Standard, and we'll talk about them a little bit more when we get some of the listeners' questions.
Yeah, absolutely lovely atmosphere at this one. I mean, yeah, I know what you mean about the fire. Like, imagine setting fire to that would have been a little bit ridiculous. Another good atmosphere was at the Jan Breidel on Sunday lunchtime, which saw the Bruges derby between Cercle and Club. Club obviously coming off the back of that 2-0 defeat to Benfica in the Champions League. Criticism, there was definitely some criticism for Scott Parker after that one, because before the game he'd spoken about being brave and all that, and then he stuck Dennis Odoi in midfield, which kind of pissed a lot of Club fans off. Ironically, Dennis Odoi looked like he'd scored the opening goal, but the offside flag, or I think it's VR, I can't remember, intervened, which would have been quite funny, because then if that had, let's say he had scored, Scott Parker could turn around and be like, look, I knew exactly what I was doing at the time. Odoi did start this one, but he was at right back for Clinton Matter. But it was their best player on the pitch midweek that got them off to a good start in this one. Lovely counter-attack actually from Club. Jutler set free, was given offside, but then VAR showed that he was just onside. He races free. Nice unselfish play from the Spaniard. He plays it across. Noah Lang's there to tap it in. You can tell he's starting to kind of feel himself again and perform, because he's just got that arrogant look on his face that you can tell all the Cercle fans wanted to hit him and all the Club fans wanted to kiss him. Like, it's one of those sort of things. He deserves to score some more goals given his performances over the last couple of days, and he was by far their best player against Benfica. And I mean, in the summer, surely someone's going to finally snap him up. Cercle, I mean, they were actually the better team though. 28 shots overall, 10 shots on target, despite Hans van Aken saying it wasn't a football game. It definitely was a football game. They did get back into it. Thibaut Sommers, who was man of the match in this one, he races down the right-hand side. Silla comes to close him down, but he's managed to squeeze a pass across. Kevin Denke, first time finish into the bottom corner. straight in to the Circular fans for Big Kev to celebrate. About 20 minutes later, Club are back ahead. Another counter-attacking goal. This time the ball falls to Tajon Buchanan. He squares it across the edge of the box. Kasper Nielsen just running onto it, smashes it in. Kind of not the same goal, but he scored a similar goal last year for Union, like just running onto it and smashing it into the bottom corner that time, top corner this time. But that one was unfortunately ruled out for an offside in the build-up. This one definitely wasn't. Lovely, lovely finish from Kasper Nielsen. He clearly loves scoring down that end at the Jan Breidel. Unfair on Circular because they had been playing really, really well. But that man, Thibaut Sommers, made up for it when a corner in the 78th minute found his head and it looped over Simon Mignolet into the back stick. He gave quite a nice interview actually after the game where he spoke about how both of his grandparents have connections to the football teams in Bruges. One of them, his granddad, did die, I think it was last year, he said, and he's buried close to the Jan Breidel. And he says he always goes to see him before every single match day. And he sees his other one as well, just asking for some advice. And he used to see the other one, both his grandparents basically goes to see his granddads for advice. With the other one, the one that passed away, he went to his grave before the game, and he said that kind of gave him some inspiration. And he was really, really good. He had a really, really good performance with Thibaut. Finished 2 goals a piece. Very interesting kind of press conference following the game. Milan Muslic looking like the happiest man, really relaxed. He's just like waxing lyrical about his side. I think he said Thibaut Sommers gave like the blueprint performance for a Circular player, which I thought was quite nice considering he's been there for, I think he said 15 years. As in Sommers, not Muslic, obviously. You could just tell Milan's clearly very relaxed in his kind of how things are going, his own position, whereas Scott Parker's starting to realise that this is a lot of a much bigger job than probably he realised at the beginning. He was asked a couple of questions. I think one was about whether he takes any responsibility for the performance. To be fair to him, he did. He came out and was like, yeah, I take some responsibility. I picked the team. But he said he felt they took 2 steps back. They're not brave on the ball. All the stuff we've kind of been hearing over the last couple of weeks. The fans are starting to turn a little bit, aren't they, Scott? I think they're starting to get a little bit frustrated. They're looking at what's happened and they're saying, well, this is kind of the same form we saw under Carl Huskin. So why did we make a change? What is this? Is he the right man? And we've got questions, so we'll get to them then. But a good game, one that Circular on another day probably would have won.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this actually. It was a really good derby. I was looking forward to it beforehand, you know what I mean, as you always should with, big city derbies like this. I thought the build-up was kind of quite nice as well. And yeah, Circle should have won it. I think you're right, it's interesting. I think Miron, his post-match press conference was quite philosophical about it when he said, look, I know we've played very well today. And he used the word humility, which is a word that Circle use kind of quite a lot. So I think they recognise that actually on another day they probably would have won the game because they certainly deserved to. And it was just one of those where they just have to accept they couldn't quite get it over the line, although they were much the better side on the whole. And actually the goals that they gave away were you can't do too much about Kasper Nielsen's goal because it's just a fantastic finish, textbook Nielsen. If he's not scoring goals like that, then he's having a pop in most games at that particular shot as well. It's much like that thing that Nicholas Storm does at Mechelen, where he cuts inside and drives the ball low in at the near post. It's just a textbook indicator of what he does at Mechelen and what Nielsen does now at club and previously at Union. Yeah, you're right. I mean, some bizarre stuff from Scotty Parker again in his post-match. And you're right to reference there's a lot of club fans now starting to ask real questions. I mean, he has to be given time, of course. It's still early days. But I think fans, 9 games in now, have seen enough to suggest that there's some things that they feel sort of need addressing. And I can kind of understand that. I think they're still searching for the right defensive makeup. And I think as Scotty Parker was alluding to, I think, they do need to be braver on the ball up top. And on Noah Lang specifically, you're right. I think he has been getting better. It was interesting to see him sulk off down the tunnel, visibly unhappy. at full time, because he seems to be one of the few players who's actually trying to perform at a level that you would hope that they could get to. And he's clearly frustrated that, frankly, his teammates are not quite anywhere near the level they should be at. That I think is at the source of some of his frustrations, which is difficult. I mean, that's a difficult one for Scotty Parker to handle, because he has to manage Noah Lang's temperament, while at the same time obviously getting him to bring that fire onto the pitch. So that's kind of tricky when, generally performances aren't at the level that they should be. But this was a really good game, actually. If you've got a chance to go and rewatch this, even if it's just the highlights, do that, because it was a really enjoyable, feisty encounter. And it was nice to see a decent crowd at the Jan Bridal as well. I think there was about 12,000 there for this game. Circle had given clubs slightly more of an allocation than they would normally get as away supporters. I think they had about 5,000 there. Circle had about 7 in, I think, which was nice. I think that improved the atmosphere. Circle's attendances have been increasing recently as well, which is a nice reflection on the fact that they're having a very good season and attracting more attention, which is obviously the way you would like to see things go. But a good game this, and a really enjoyable one.
Yeah, I think it's no coincidence that, well, I don't know if that's probably chatting absolute nonsense, but you look through the Circular side, and for a derby, it's nice to see people like Ravic, De Man, Van Hoot, Thibaut Sommers, and Robbie Da Costa coming on, like players that have come through the Circular Academy, then getting their chances in the first team, despite what you could probably perceive as, like, obviously with the Monaco link, you'd think there'd probably be a lot less of that. You know what I mean? That there'd be more players kind of coming through that way and being used to it. So I know actually players like Sommers, De Man, Van Hoot, Rabbits, they've been given a chance to show what they can do, and they're showing what they can do, especially Thibaut Sommers. Like I said, he was fantastic in this one. I'm sure club fans would like to see more of that on their side of things, with someone we'll mention a little bit later, who's been on absolute fire for Vesselo at the moment. They'd probably much rather see him in the side at the moment. Before we move on, Scott, just a quick one. Do you give them club, that is, any chance in Lisbon?
Not really. And I base that on two things, two specific things. One, their current form. I think there's just nothing to suggest that they can go and score 3 without conceding, because conceding has been a problem for them actually for a while now. They've not been able to keep the back door closed, and also the firepower they're up against in their home stadium would be a big worry. It's entirely different going to Benfica 1-0 down to 2-0 down. Having said that, and this is the only caveat in it, if club can get the first goal, then there could yet be a game in this, but I just feel it's gone now.
Yeah, I mean, if you have I didn't watch the game, but I've definitely watched the highlights, and it was just all the chances of Benfica. They could have had 5 or 6, just by the look of it, the amount of times they hit the post and everything like that. So, yeah, this is one of the better teams in European football. The Portuguese league is very, very good, and Benfica away is going to be a difficult task. But like you said, fingers crossed. I think the problem, I'd love them to have gone there with a 1-0 lead or something like that, so then they could kind of sit deep, play on the counter, like release Lang and get him to kind of run at people like he was doing during the game. But I think, 2-0, it's a really tough ask. And it'll be frustrating because the 2 goals they gave away were just poor defending, really. Like the first one, Hendry giving the penalty, and then Maya just kind of falling asleep on the ball for the second one. That will frustrate Scott Parker, because, even if they'd gone in at 0-0, they'd have still had a reasonable chance. Let's get to another of the European sides, though. Again, obviously, after this kind of 2-2 draw, that gave them a great chance to close the gap on the top 4. They obviously were coming off that 1-0 defeat in Azerbaijan. They lost 1-0 to Karabag. Roof did actually save a penalty in this one. Gift Orban had a couple of chances, but I think Karabag were kind of the better side over the 90 minutes. But I think Ghent definitely have a chance in this one. I'll ask what your opinion is on that, Scott. But let's start with their game against Leuven. 0-0 at half time between, Leuven just can't score at the moment. That's 2 games without a goal. Just 1 goal in the last 4 games, I think it was. 14 shots, just 4 on target. Ghent didn't play well, but they got the win. Hugo Kuipers even said after the game he's played a lot better. But he tapped in from a Hong cross to make it 1-0 in the 49th minute. He then turned provider for Sven Kums to make it 2-0 in the 73rd. not the best Ghent performance, Scott, but I think at the end of the day, it's just about racking up some points after they'd gone 3 without a win, closes the gap on Club Brugge to just 1 point. So, I mean, they should now be thinking much more about getting into that playoff one, and they do face Club next Sunday. So, I mean, that's going to be a really, really important game. Not defining by any means, but an important game. And yeah, they've had a pretty good run of it against Club recently, especially this year. They beat them 2-0 at home. So they'll definitely fancy their chances on Sunday.
Yeah, it's set up really, really nicely actually with this weekend's results, and particularly bearing in mind the kind of form that Club are in. I think Ghent will be hugely encouraged kind of going into that game as well. Yeah, I mean, I thought that this was an interesting game actually, because although, you know, kind of Ghent won reasonably easy in the end, it doesn't tell the whole story. I think Leuven missed a lot of chances in this game and could have got something out of it. It's what I was saying last week about, you know, taking your chances and the importance of that. And we've been speaking about this for a while. Just a really wretched run, Leuven. I think that's one win in 9 for them now. So 9 out of the last 27 points, which is really, really poor. They could have got someone out of this, like I say. That's the interesting thing. You know, they created the opportunities to do that and just kind of couldn't take them. I felt defensively, I thought they were a bit poor in this game as well, from what I saw of it. And I think that was a big factor in the goals, actually. You know, just players not quite at it at all. Not getting the basics right, but their poor form kind of continues, and bizarrely they're not in as bad a predicament as you would imagine, considering the run of form that they've been on. I keep saying this about them, but it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there this summer, because I suspect there's another 2 or 3 quite important players to them who probably will move on in the summer. So there's going to be a bit like at St Truiden. I can see a reasonably big changing of the guard there, possibly. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. But yeah, again, keeping up some form of momentum in the race for that kind of final playoff 1 spot, which is becoming really, really interesting now, because there's another side that we'll talk about shortly who I think probably would argue that they, on the basis of their form anyway, and if they can maintain that, will also be in with a shout of bagging that spot, and nobody's talking about them at the moment.
No, but we certainly will, that's for sure. But let's move on to another side that had European football during the week, which was Anderlecht. They fell 1-0 as well, like Ghent. They fell to Ludogorets, the Bulgarian champions. Benito Raman had a ridiculously good chance to make it 1 apiece, but he didn't take it. Anderlecht were really good in the second half, I thought, of that one, and repeat that performance on Thursday, get an early goal, and they should go on to win that one. Against Kortrijk, they went ahead. Anders Blair with his 3rd goal in 3 games. Lovely, lovely finish from him. Another one of those goals of the week contenders. Just after the second half, though, Anderlecht were caught on the counter-attack. Messadu ran basically the length of the pitch. The Dutch commentator was shouting coast to coast as he shot. The Bruggen saved it, but Abdullah Kajli was there to tuck in the rebound. It then got even better for Kortrijk when, from a set piece, João Silva was left completely unmarked to tap home, and he went absolutely mad. I love to see that, the passion from him. They have a nice interview actually as well, kind of after the game and before the game, for the side social media, about kind of joining Kortrijk and how he's enjoying playing there and stuff, and that will certainly have made things better. And yeah, looked like Kortrijk were going to get all of the points, but then Christophe de Haan and Tom Vandenberg just completely got themselves mixed up. De Haan running back towards the goal, Vandenberg coming out. They look at each other, and this is what I don't understand. They can see each other, so like they both know, what the one's coming towards and one coming towards the other. I just don't know why De Haan passes it back. He can see where Vandenberg is, and he just passes it straight past him. Michael Maria, of all people's there, runs and puts it into the net, despite De Haan then trying to take his legs off before he does it. Finishes 2 goals apiece. Slimani had a fantastic chance to make it 3-2 to Anderlecht. They headed wide, and yeah, I think Brian Riemer said after the game he was just fuming with himself. As in Slimani, Riemer wasn't fuming with him, but Slimani said he was just livid with himself out there for missing that chance. And Scott, I mean, if Slimani had scored, it would obviously been a massive blow for Kortrijk, but that mistake from De Haan and Vandenberg, you know, when you feel like there's a potential for that to be a massive, massive mistake for Kortrijk if they go down by, let's say they go down by 2 points. They'll look back and be like, that mistake cost our season. I don't know if it will, because I feel like they're performing in these games and performing in the games when they need to, and they haven't been that bad in that sense. But yeah, you just look at something like, he's like, is that going to be a massive issue? Like, if they lose to Zorta again, it's back down to 1 point. Like, I don't know, it just feels like that could be an important moment potentially.
Yeah, I mean, a definite comedy goal, which Anderlecht will be very grateful for, because despite the fact that they started the game really, really well, Anders Dreyer scoring that brilliant goal, 3 and 6 and 1 assist he's got now. It was only last week we were talking about how well he's started. Anderlecht adding to that, really good goal. Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it, that, you know, such a comedic scenario could become hugely significant. You're right, football's funny like that sometimes. We'll need to see what happens. I think, you know, the way that Brian Reimer wants Anderlecht to play, it is very much high risk, high reward. I've seen Anderlecht fans expressing concern about, you know, them being very vulnerable to the quick counters, which we saw on a number of occasions in this game, which I think is true. But that's what happens when you play that high line, high intensity kind of game. That, you know, if your defence in particular, and that's who the pressure's going to be on, you know, when you're in the opposition's box, when you get caught like that, you know, just have to be super aware of things like that. And I think they're still adjusting to that playing style. They probably deserved a point in the end, but Kortrijk will be hugely frustrated, I think, not to have won this game, because they probably did deserve to. Once they started to get a grip of it, they were causing Anderlecht quite a lot of problems. And it's odd, isn't it? Kortrijk will be massively frustrated, I think. But, you know, as you were saying as well, I think Anderlecht have a strong case because of Slimani's chance to, you know, not to have won it themselves. And it was interesting to hear Slimani saying that he's never missed a chance like that in his career. You know, it's never happened to him. And he's kind of embarrassed by it, which I thought was kind of quite interesting. But, you know, they have been improving in recent weeks. They're creating a lot more. They're still in Europe. They've got a chance of turning that around on Thursday evening, and they're still in the hunt for a playoff 2 spot. So I think Brian Reimer's probably feeling ultimately a bit philosophical about the result.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Newcastle, Leicester, Brest, Monaco, and Algeria fans. Has he ever missed a chance like that for you? Because I'm sure he has. I can't imagine he's that clinical. As much as I do like him as a player, I think he's a good player, and I think he does bring something different to the Anderlecht side. But I can't imagine he's never missed a chance like that. And hopefully he can put some away on Thursday night to get them through in Europe, because I know it's not kind of the most important thing for them at the moment, but I feel like coefficient points are important, and they really should be able to overturn that deficit. Let's go to the final game, which was St. Truiden against Westerlo. St. Truiden had 36% possession, 1 shot on target, so obviously they lost. Aboubakari Koita got himself sent off in the 39th minute. Matson de Koita stood up and took the penalty to make it 1-0 to Westerlo. Daniel Schmidt made a couple of decent saves to keep it at 1-0, but that is how it finished. De Koita also came out recently and said that club tried to get him back in the winter window, but he'd rather have stayed at Westerlo for his own development, which, I mean, you'd be frustrated if you were a club fan knowing that he didn't come back, because the way he's been playing has been absolutely fantastic, but it's great for Westerlo. And it is kind of, in the grand scheme of things, another really good result for them as well, because it kind of pushes the gap away from kind of the bottom of that playoff 2 bit. So they're now 3 points away from Cercle, 4 points ahead of Anderlecht in 9th. But like you're saying, Scott, you can now kind of start to look up a little bit, because they're only 4 points off of playoff 1. They're playing very good football. They're in very good form. Losing Lyle Foster didn't affect them. Didn't really think it would affect them that much anyway. As he scored, I don't think he's even scored in the league for Burnley yet. That's just crazy transfer fee. We can talk about that again probably at the end of the season. But it's like they haven't missed a beat really without him. They've just kind of kept going, kept trundling along. They've got goals and creativity from other places. So very good side to watch. This wasn't the best game to watch by any stretch of the imagination. Disappointing for St. Truiden, because now that's 2 defeats on the bounce, just 1 win in their last 5 as well. Whereas Westerlo unbeaten in their last 5, 2 wins, 3 draws. Like you said, I don't think they're going to make playoff one, but I think they've definitely got to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, you look at the last 5 matches, Westerlo, 9 out of 15 points. They've been pretty consistent for the majority of the season. And if they can maintain anything like that sort of form and a combination of other results go their way, then, it's not out of the question that they could squeak in right at the end. And nobody's really kind of talking about that. Everyone's talking about Ghent and Club and potentially could Standard squeeze in. But I think you have to look at Westerlo's position and take into consideration their form generally and honestly say, well, they have to be in with a chance as well, which I find really, really interesting. Much the better side this weekend. You mentioned Maxim de Kuiper, really great season he's having. Interesting here, Domenico Tedesco, the new Red Devils T1, mentioned him twice actually in conversation recently. So it's going to be fascinating to see whether he maybe gets a call up for the upcoming friendly against Germany. That's definitely something to keep an eye on, I think, because he's somebody that Tedesco fancies quite a bit and has been very impressed by his development. And I think his decision to stay at Westerlo rather than going back to club when he could have, I think has been vindicated, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a little bit like the Bill El-Khanous situation where he came out and signed that new contract at Genk and said he wants to stay and kind of continue to develop. And I kind of respect it when players see the bigger picture in that sense. Not that I think De Kuiper would probably have played for Club Brugge if he had gone back. I can't imagine why they wouldn't have used him. Bearing in mind he's been probably the best left back in the league at the moment. So yeah, definitely a Westerlo, a team to keep their eye on. We've got plenty of listener questions, but before we get to those, Scott, do you want to just quickly run over some news coming out of the Challenger Pro League this week?
Yeah, well, we're at that stage of the season where the Challenger Pro League's had a week off this past week before the playoffs start, which is nice for those sides, although I'm sure they've all been working very hard because they've got 10 big games ahead of them, whether they're in playoff 1 or playoff 2. There was one game this weekend, actually, which was the postponed game from the 20th of January between Young Genk and SL16. That finished 2 each. There was a bit of intrigue around that, which is now not intriguing. We won't go into that because there's some comedy gold and it's too long-winded now that that's been settled, but that was quite amusing. But the main bit of news really to come out of the Challenger Pro League over the past week is confirmation from Lierse that T1 Tom van Imscoot is leaving the club at the end of the season. He's decided that he won't seek to renew his contract. 3 years there is enough, and I think he fancies a new challenge. So that's the big story in the CPL this week. One other bit of news below the Challenger Pro League, down in the first amateur division, kind of tragic news that Winkelsport's 25-year-old goalkeeper Arnie Espiel collapsed and died over the last few days after saving a penalty in their recent game last weekend. Tragic news. Nobody likes to see that, particularly, at such a young age. Really, really horrible news. Winkelsport down, as I was saying, in the first amateur division, they're round about mid-table at the moment. Horrible news.
Yeah, truly awful news. Really, really, really awful when that came out. You just don't expect that to happen on a football pitch. So yeah, definitely all our thoughts are with him and his family. And yeah, interesting about Lies. I wonder, whether he'll look. I don't know if St. Truiden might be looking at him. Do you know what I mean? He's done a really good job there. So he could definitely be of interest to a couple of Pro League sides.
Yeah, I think he's definitely looking for a new challenge, and I think he's probably right. The timing's very interesting. He said he felt like 3 years was a good spell there, and there's an awareness, obviously, that the Challenger Pro League is going to be a very, very competitive division next year with 3 sides coming down, so it's going to be even harder to get out of. And I suppose that opens up other opportunities, both at other clubs in that division potentially, but also potential Pro League opportunities as well. But I think he has done, on the whole, a very good job there. So a bit of clarity for Lierse, and they can now start looking at a new T1 ahead of next season.
Yep, absolutely. Let's go to some listener questions. We'll kind of group them a little bit because there's a couple about club and a couple about standard and then some others. But we'll start with a question from Forgotten Clubs. Obviously, that is from the book account, the book that's been out for a while now, hasn't it? Forgotten Clubs, which Scott, I know you were helpful in contributing to, from Philip O'Rourke. So I presume this question is from Phil. He asked, do you think Circle will end up in the European places at the end of the season? I'll let you take this one first.
I don't see why not on the basis of their form. They're definitely in with a shout. I mean, it's really a question of whether probably Circle or Anderlecht are going to squeak in. I think Circle have been more consistent than Anderlecht, so I think they probably have to be favourites to kind of squeak in. If they do, it would be a remarkable achievement for them and a wonderful reward for what has been a very good season. We know there's a lot of good things happening at Circle. On and off the pitch, actually. The club are in kind of quite a good place, generally speaking. So it'd be a fantastic reward if they could do that. I definitely think they've got a chance.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you there. And I think, obviously, from like kind of a slightly biased perspective, I guess we could say, obviously, Circle have been very, very open with us as a podcast and given us kind of a lot of access to what they do and how they operate. So we know what's kind of going on there. So I think I'd love to see them make it. Not least I'd love to go watch them play in Europe as well. I think that'd be quite a fun thing to do. And yeah, it'd be kind of a nice reward for kind of the progress they've been making over the last couple of seasons. And yeah, there've been some decisions there that the fans haven't necessarily liked at the start, but they've started to, the bigger picture starting to being realised, and it's a good young team and it'd be quite an exciting team to see in Europe, but it's going to be competitive, I think. So yeah, I'd like them to get there, but it's definitely not a formality at the moment. I think it's going to be they've got to continue the good form that they're showing at the moment. Just a quick one, because I know we probably get asked this one quite a lot, and it's one that I always kind of forget the answer to because we answer it and then I just kind of ignore it again. But coaches with captains' armbands, what's the deal? From Mr. Sleepy.
Yeah, well, that's a technical thing, isn't it? I mean, the short answer to that is the Pro League have a regulation where, the T1 has to be clearly identified because in theory, they're the only one allowed in that immediate technical area outside the box. So it's just to simply clearly identify who the T1 is, because they obviously have responsibility for controlling their own staff as and when things kick off as well. So it's purely for identification purposes. But it looks nice as well.
Yeah, it's not just a fashion accessory, but I'm sure people can get them somewhere in Belgium. Let's go. We've got a couple on standard, so we'll just kind of group them a little bit together. We'll start with the one from Ollie. It's really Ollie. Will Dyler manage to bring consistency to standard if he gets a sufficient budget over the summer? I actually wrote a piece kind of about this for Get Belgian and Dutch Football. GBENEFN on Twitter. Just search it there. You'll probably find it over there. Just kind of about the job he's done this season and why they should definitely back him in the summer, because I don't think they even need to give him it's not like they need to give him like a war chest or anything like that, because he's shown what he can get out of the players he's got already, but he just needs a couple of key pieces, I think, to really give them consistency. I think it's a striker that can at least get like 10 to 12 goals a season. I think that's all he really needs, someone that can do that, but then also fit into his style of play. And if he can keep Philip Zinkernagel, or a player like a Philip Zinkernagel in terms of a player with a little bit of class and quality, maybe Tien Chanak come in and do that role after a little bit more time. But yeah, I think he has to be backed in the summer, that they have to give him, even if they can't give him a load of money and stuff like that, they have to get him a couple of key targets that he wants and key kind of positional players that he needs. Because I think there will be a little bit of a turnover there in terms of the defence. Probably like Dussen, maybe Leifis will move on. Potentially getting a couple of new defenders in there will be quite useful. But he's shown what he can do with like a limited playing side. So I think you kind of have to judge him on what he's done so far. And if you're judging on what he's done so far, I presume he probably would bring some more consistency to standard if he did get a sufficient budget, or even just a budget in the summer. Scott, what do you reckon on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's going to be given very much money, to be honest. I think they've been quite open in saying, look, we're going to go down the road of developing talent, both talent we've already got in and bringing in talent from outside. I think 2 or 3 will come in, and I think you're right, Ben. I think they'll be very carefully chosen in key positions with the intention of injecting the kind of quality that they would, the quality that's kind of been missing from the side. But he's proved that he can get really good performances out of players who perhaps don't have the quality they would like. So I don't think they will necessarily be giving him that much money or looking to spend that much. It's about the long game here, and I think they're doing all of the right things, actually. I think adding that little bit of quality could be a really important factor in just tweaking the consistency, which might hint at another one of those questions.
Yes, there's 2 kind of very similar questions. One from Flying Dutchman, who's a self-proclaimed Adnan Januzaj fan. Can't imagine there's many of you out there, so fair play. But he says, comment on Standard season so far, the good and the ugly. And then Ben BS Colo asked a couple of a similar question basically. What does Standard need to do to maintain consistency? Like, how do you lose 2-0 at home to Kortrijk and then blast 4 past Union on the road? I think basically with Standard this year, they seem to play either up or down to whoever they're playing against. When they're playing against a side that's weaker than them, they just don't play with the same intensity. They're not really good at kind of controlling and dominating a game like that. But when they're playing against a side who are better than them, they just kind of raise their game that little bit more. They just kind of put in 110%, the classic footballing cliche, it doesn't exist, rather than like the 90% they'll put in against a side like Kortrijk. So I think that is the issue. And I think it's kind of what we said, that they don't have the squad's not like massive on quality. So I think Dyler tries to get the best he can out of them. But I think if they're going to be more consistent, they do just need to, like you were saying, Scott, like the Union game is the blueprint for every performance going forward. Play like that, they don't lose 2-0 to Kortrijk, do they? They'll probably beat them 3-0 at home or something like that, but that's just not what they've been doing. So I think it's matching their kind of not playing up or down to people's level, but like playing to their own level, which just they haven't been doing this season.
Yeah, that little bit more consistency, I think, would mean that they would be in a playoff 1 spot now. If they hadn't dropped some of the points that they probably shouldn't have, then I have no doubts at all they would be in there at the expense of a club, almost certainly at the moment. They've proved that they can take on the big boys. I mean, they've already beaten Antwerp, Anderlecht, Club and Union this season. So, you know, they can do it. They just need to address the other issue, mentality-wise, of how they approach sides that maybe aren't considered kind of top sides as well. And this is where what I was saying about, you know, injecting just that little bit more quality in key areas in the squad, I think could be the factor that sort of allows them to do that. Be interesting to see how they get on over the next few weeks, because up next they're away to Anderlecht, at home to Westerlo, and then they go to the Jan Breidel to play Club. So we'll see if they can continue that streak of managing to beat the big boys. And yes, Westerlo fans, you are a big boy in terms of your form. You've earned the right to be considered one of the bigger boys in my eyes anyway at the moment.
I'm not sure if I'm going to jump on that bandwagon just yet. Another one from Neil Shalat is, I suppose the big one is, can Club Brugge hold on to 4th place spot ahead of Ghent and Standard? Scott, I'll let you go first on this one.
On the basis of what I'm seeing at the moment, no.
I feel like I'm just waiting for them to go on a run, and I feel like it is going to happen. And I'm just going to keep saying, I do think they finish in the top 4. Whether that gives them any chance of a run at the title or not, I don't think so. But I just feel like there is enough quality in that side that they should finish in the top 4. And we've just spoken about Standard and Ghent. Like, Standard inconsistency will probably cost them the chance of it. And then Ghent, again, they're inconsistent. So in my mind, I think Club can, because they aren't losing games at least, they're still picking up points. So even when Ghent and Standard drop points against random teams, Club will go and draw their games. So they're still kind of going to have that chance to break away. So I do think they will, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. I guess we could say just, like you said, Scott, on the way they're playing. Which kind of, we can follow that up with the Mike de Klerk question. his first question is, will Scott Parker make it through to the end of the season? If they make the top four, I think yes. If they don't make the top four, I feel like they kind of have to. I don't know what you think, Scott, but I feel like they kind of have to stick with him
Yeah,
because
yeah,
because he wasn't their first choice, or to kind of save face. I just don't think they can sack him. They kind of have to give him the summer transfer window. They just need to save face on it. Like I personally don't think he was. I'd never kind of thought he was the right man. But like you said, he does need some time, and he deserves that transfer window potentially. But if they don't make the top four, they could, and then they've got that reason to. Because I think if they get out of the Champions League, that's not a reason to sack him. I think that's really unfair. But missing out of the top four might give them the cover to do it. But because I don't think they will, I think he's probably going to be there at the end of the year.
yeah. I think he will see the season out. I think if they miss out on a playoff one spot, I think the question of a change in the summer becomes a really hot topic then. I think that's probably a minimum required from the board's point of view to finish in playoff one. I think internally, I think they probably accept now that the league's gone, even if they do manage to stay in playoff one. I think they're too far off it, excluding a really strong turnaround in form, which there's just no indication of is coming. I think they're too far off it now, to be honest. But I think he will see the season out, but I think his position will become quite difficult for him if they don't finish in playoff one. I can see a change in the summer if that scenario arises, particularly with fans now increasingly questioning what they're actually seeing. I mean, he's what, 10 or games or so in now. He's got another 8 or 9 games. At that point, you'll have had round about 18, 19 games to show your worth. And I think that's enough time to make a judgment if kind of beyond the summer as to whether there's a future for Scotty Parker there next season. So it's still all up in the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, 100%. I think missing out on European football as well would be like huge because they should be in Europe, and let's just look at the amount of money they're bringing in. There's no reason they shouldn't be higher up in the league anyway, that they could have spent in January if they really wanted to, but maybe they were not wanting to back him too much. He even said he didn't want any new players, but I don't know, you can maybe read two things there. Second question from Mike is, he says he's a fan of Dino de Bast as a young Belgian talent. Can he be a player that Anderlecht build around to get back into playoff one in the coming years? Or is he more likely to move league soon? Where do you see his ceiling? You can go first on this one as well, Scott.
Well, he's already a central part of that side, key player for them, really, and will be for the future. I certainly think he'll be there next season. Beyond next season, I don't know. I think it depends on the rate of his progress. He is clearly one of the bright lights for the future. Has a big part to play for the national team, I think, going forward as well. So everything's in his favour. I want him to stick around as long as possible in Belgium for obvious reasons, because he's guaranteed playing time there. So my own point of view, I would like him to see him stick around another couple of years. But because of the way things tend to work, if he keeps progressing at the rate that he is, I can certainly see him being around next season. But beyond that, I think the chances of him getting potentially that big move become increasingly more likely. And how long Anderlecht can hold on to him is going to depend on a number of factors. One of which being how far they can go in Europe as well, which will have a big bearing, I think, potentially on their summer transfer business, because if they don't progress on Thursday, there's the very real possibility they might have to let another 2 or 3 go in order to partially help finance some of their plans for the summer as well. So small details have big implications at this level, but really great young player to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, definitely a big fan of Zeno. I don't know how you can't be, really, if you watch Anderlecht and Belgian football. If you're a fan of the national team, you're quite excited about what you're seeing from him. I don't know where I see his ceiling, because I just find it really hard to judge a player at that age before he has moved on, because we have seen players move on from the Belgian league and struggle. Then you've seen other players move on and kind of flourish. So it's like, which one is he going to be? It just depends at what time he moves. I know he said he wants to stay for longer. He sees himself staying at least to next year. So I hope he stays as long as possible. But I think you're right, Scott. I think it just depends on the finances for them. And if it comes down to kind of like with Duranville, where they're like, well, short term, we need the short term cash investment rather than thinking about the long term, chuck a nice little sell on percentage fee But they'll definitely be interested in him in the summer. Like, you just know all the top clubs will probably be circling because they'll see Anderlecht. They know how good the academy is at producing players. So they'll look at Dabas and think, yeah, we'll bring him over. So I hope he stays, but it's not unlikely that he would leave despite what he said. It'd be interesting to see kind of how the fans would react if they did let him go and that sort of thing, because I know they'll be reasonably upset. Like, obviously they're used to young players leaving, but I feel like he's one of them they want to stick around a little bit longer, because we've kind of seen with Sambi obviously going to Arsenal, that just hasn't worked out at all, and it's kind of hampered his development as a player, which is really frustrating because he was quality for Anderlecht and he's just been played in different positions for Arsenal where he wasn't used to being when he was playing at Anderlecht, and it's just, yeah, it's a shame because he is one player that we rated quite highly, and now like we almost look a bit silly because people are like, well, he's flopped at Arsenal. It's like, well, you can rate a player highly in the Belgian Pro League. It doesn't mean they need to then go to a top four title challenging side in Europe. That they can go and play for a mid-tier team searching for Europe, kind of like Doku has and stuff like that. Obviously, he's not been completely firing either. So yeah, it's kind of hard to really give a ceiling. But if he keeps developing like he is, then yeah, I mean, he'll go on to be one of the better Belgian defenders of his generation, that's for sure. But fingers crossed that he gets the chance to do that by getting regular playing time. I think that is every question we had. Thanks everyone for submitting those. We'll definitely do another round of those next week because it's great to kind of hear from everyone. And yeah, if you want to send us a question in the meantime, please just do get in touch. We're really open to that. That probably just about does it for this week's episode. Scott, as always, it's been a pleasure spending time with you this evening.
An absolute delight. Wouldn't miss it for the world. See you next week, everybody. And good luck to Anderlecht and Ghent in Europe this week.
Fingers crossed we'll get at least one of those sides through. They should both go through, but it's Belgian teams in Europe, so you just know something stupid is probably going to happen. But we'll be back next week to talk about that. In the meantime, if you like what we do, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. And yeah, we'll be back next week for another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.